Yeah, we thought we were going to maybe see the offense break out of it on Friday when they scored 9 runs, and we saw Arenado finally hit for some power. He had that first home run since August 19th, and that was really good to see, but it's kind of the story for the Cardinals where if you have a game like that, you can almost expect the next couple of games to be a little more lean in the run-scoring department, and that's the way it was the rest of the weekend in Arizona. The Cardinals lose 2 of 3. Another trend that's establishing itself, it's kind of similar to what we saw to begin last season. Remember last year when the Cardinals just weren't winning the last game of a series? That's happening again now, as through 5 series of the season, the Cardinals have lost the series finale each and every time.
I almost thought it was
5.
The first game of the series.
At any rate, they're 0-5 in.
I thought there were a lot of instances last year where it was
going on last year. I can't remember specifically.
Yeah.
But it's a problem now where the Cardinals have had opportunities to put teams away. They've had chances to finish series off, and now 0-5, not able to get the job done in those series finales.
Yeah, and whether it was last year or a lot of times I thought they were just trying to avoid the sweep, and then this year they can't seem to finish the job, and it's hurting them to try and at least get good vibes going into the next series because you're usually hopping on a plane after that and you don't have a happy flight or things like that. So it's starting to weigh a little bit more. And again, I just don't. Yesterday they scored 0 runs, like a shutout, and sometimes I see it's a little unfair when we see headlines like this. I know it's not meant to do it on purpose, but Miles Michaelis gave up 5 runs in 1 inning. He takes the loss, and a lot of the headlines say, well, Miles Michaelis and the Cardinals fall to so-and-so. And, I mean, sometimes it's like, okay, yes, Michaelis lost the game, but he didn't get any run support. Like, can we give the guy some offense? Yesterday, everything just went wrong for the Cardinals trying to get the bats going. And again, we're hearing, and mostly you're hearing, Brenden, on social media, well, why not move this guy up the order? Why not move that guy down? Or things like that. If they're not hitting, then it's not going to matter where they are in the lineup. That's the bottom line.
Well, and yesterday the complaints were largely about Masyn Winn and the fact that he's now through 16 games. We've seen the Cardinal rookie shortstop on the bench 4 times. So 25% of the team's games he hasn't played. And people say, well, he's a 22-year-old shortstop, should be in the prime of his physical fitness. Why are the Cardinals so intent upon giving him these extra days off at this point in the season? It's not like it's summertime and the weather outside is beating you down in the dog days of summer. This is still April. And in the case on Sunday's game in Arizona, I believe the roof was actually closed. So it's not like it's a weather-related issue. But the Cardinals have been very careful to manage the workload of Masyn Winn to this point. It's something that Ollie Marmol has, been asked about, obviously, and has said, yeah, this is something that we're doing. We're going to try to make sure he's fresh. And yesterday it was more of the same. He said, look, this is a spot where Mason's body could use a day off. And some of the comments that I get as a result of that just kind of make me want to pull my hair out, because I've seen people say, well, at Masyn Winn's age, Albert Pujols was playing this many games, or, Cal Ripken Jr. never needed a day off. And I'm like, folks,
oh my God,
you're talking about Hall of Fame caliber players. You're talking about a guy who literally, as a result of his ability to grind it out and play every single game and still not lose a step in his performance, he got nicknamed the Iron Man. So comparing rookie Masyn Winn to that threshold is maybe not the most fair thing in the world to be doing. I understand just on the surface you can look at it and say, well, he's 22 years old. Why should he need these extra days off? But last year played 142 games. That was the most he had played in his in his professional baseball career. And toward the end of those 142 games, he was with St. Louis, remember, hitting for a 172 batting average, perhaps not getting the most out of his physical ability and performance. And I can recall from January at winter warmup when he mentioned that to end last season, his weight had dropped into kind of the 160s range. And he said coming into this year, he'd like to get up to 190, 195, so that when he loses the standard 10 to 15 pounds that he tends to lose throughout a season, just because of the rigors of what you're putting your body through to do this every day, he could end up being around 180, 185 instead of 165. So, like, these are all physical aspects that are going on behind the scenes that the Cardinals are cognizant of, and they're in conversation with Masyn Winn about. But Cardinals fans are real upset with Ollie Marmol. Well, it's Ollie Marmol's fault for sitting the shortstop, and Ollie Marmol gets the game. He just has to kind of take that commentary because he knows that nobody is ever going to maybe fully understand what's going on behind closed doors with the team. But my point was, look, if you're going to be upset about the fact that, as you led the show with, Andy, these elite bats that you're paying to be the best players on this team are still not consistently performing as such, and that's a result that gets you to 0 runs against Zach Gallen yesterday. It never feels good when it's Zach Gallen because, of course, he used to be in the Cardinal organization. He was traded away in the Ozuna deal and everybody. So I get that kind of piles on to the angst a little bit further. But I don't know, man. If your biggest issue is that Ollie Marmol didn't put the right shortstop in the 8-hole in the lineup yesterday, and that's why they lost 5-0 instead of winning 6-5, I think we're seeing this thing a little bit differently. It is concerning. Cardinals offense is concerning, but not because of the decisions to me that are being made by the manager, but because the guys that are being paid to hit the best aren't performing. And Goldschmidt in particular just didn't have a great weekend. Against his former team, you thought maybe that would be an opportunity for him to break out of it a little bit. Arenado did it Friday, but we're still not seeing enough, I think, from those guys. And yesterday certainly just did not do enough against Zach Gallen and company. And so you lose the series finale, and you're still kind of mired a little bit below 500 right now with people getting on edge about, well, is this going to be 2023 all over again?
875-KTGR if you want to call or text us about the Cardinals offense or lack thereof here on the Big Show at 413. Tim texting in, I realize we're only a 10th into the season, sitting 21st in runs. Got a lot of work to do to be that top 10 offense you all were talking about. I mean, yeah, sure they do. It requires Paul Goldschmidt to not have a 538 OPS right now.
That would help, wouldn't it?
Right? Like that's terrible.
Is that really what it is?
Like, yeah, it's awful. Like
Let me double check this.
Terrible. It's 538. That's what I'm seeing.
I mean, he's in 193
193 is the batting average.
Low average. He's out. His on base is higher than his slug, and his on base isn't even a 300 on base. Like he has. After that game in Los Angeles to lead off the season, Andy, he hit a homer, and we said, "Oh, the spring stats, they don't matter. He's back. He's Goldie." Well, he's kind of really struggled since then.
Yeah. And, I mean, Arenado has kind of picked it up, but he's still down at 669 on the OPS. That's not where he wants to be.
No, and he went 3 for 5 on Friday, hit a mammoth home run. Lars Nootbaars was actually even further. Those dudes hit, I was like 428 and 435 or something like that on the footage. But, yeah, you're not going to get away with Arenado having a sub 700 OPS, and you're certainly not going to get away with Paul Goldschmidt having a sub 550 OPS. And appreciate the texter who mentioned the notion of a top 10 offense, because that's been my drumbeat is, hey, look, the way this team is constructed, and I'm talking about the rotation, building the back of that rotation with some guys that you kind of know their ERA is going to be in the 4s. And that might be optimistic on some of these. You look right now, Michaelis is in the 5.8 range. Our guy Gibby is having a tough start, ERA in the 6s. So let's just say that the rotation levels out and those guys end up with the ERAs that they're supposed to, 4.5. Lance Lynn's maybe in the upper 3s, perhaps, whatever the case might be there. But the Cardinals knowingly built a rotation that wasn't going to be the strength of this team, the upside of this team. It was going to be kind of the stabilizing force in the middle. The bullpen was ideally going to be a little more fresh, Andy, when they get into games, because your starters are going deeper, because that's the guys you picked. You handpicked them so that they could get you through 6-7 innings more often than not, and that's going to help your bullpen. But that doesn't bring about a playoff contender unless it's paired with an offense that is nestled, I say, firmly inside the top 10. I don't just think scratching the surface of top 10 is even enough. I'm not predicting the Cardinals at this point are going to do those things, but I said all along that's what they're going to have to do with the way their rotation is built if they're going to be a contender. So that's why you're concerned. You can maybe, just kind of excuse it as only being 10% of the way through the season, and it's early. But we kind of played that game last year, and it came back to bite the Cardinals. So, again, I'm not sounding the alarm bells, but I'm moving that DEFCON meter a little bit to say, if this is what the Cardinals' offense is, you're not going to get a different result than last year.
No.
You have to have these guys come around, or it's going to be more of the same. That's just the way that the team is built, and it was designed, in my mind, when you look on paper at the names that they put together, and the rotation that they chose to have, it was designed to where it only works if the offense is elite. And it's easy to see right now they're not getting that kind of production at the plate.
I mean, the names might be elite, but right now those names are not. They're either hurt or they're not performing to the way that they should be. And that's the bottom line there. So right now, but what'd you say? Like that, maybe that, as Tim said, we're only a 10th into the season. Paul Goldschmidt doesn't have to have a 538 OPS for the entire season. In fact, I expect that he won't. I expect that it'll be a lot higher than that when it's all said and done.
Way to go on a limb.
I know, right?
Crazy.
Sorry. I know, hot take and everything, but if things level out, if things do get better than they are now, is this offense contender worthy? Is this a team that has an offense right now that can compete with the top of the National League?
I don't know. Look, we joke about your commentary on Goldie. He's not going to have a 538 OPS. Real bold, haha, very funny. But what's interesting is what OPS is he going to have? Because if you look lifetime, he's a 900 OPS guy.
Right.
In his MVP season, he was a 980 OPS, but last year he did drop off considerably to an 810. Can he get back to 810? That's going to be a lot of homers are going to have to be hit to get him there. And even is that going to be enough? Because that was on a team that struggled.
It's still even above average. An average OPS is around the 700 or so, something like that.
Yeah.
So you still have to be from a horrid start. You have to be so much better to even get to where Paul Goldschmidt is even a little bit below what his career average is, which is a large thing to ask for at this point.
So let's just say they wake up today and Paul Goldschmidt the rest of the year is 2023 Paul Goldschmidt. He's an 810 OPS the rest of the way. Okay, but that's probably going to be, when you factor in the bad start over the first 16 games, what will he finish? 785 on OPS or whatever? It's not going to be enough. That isn't going to be enough. He's got to kind of return to, look, we were talking about Goldie and Arenado coming into the year. The narrative was 2023 was a bad year for both. Goldie could maybe be facing that age-related decline, but also he is still in great shape, and he is as dedicated as ever. So hopefully 2023 ends up being the aberration, and he performs better than that in 2024. Well, he's really struggling. So I don't even think getting Arenado and Goldie back up to their 2023 numbers is going to be enough, but even that would be almost Herculean compared to what we're seeing from these guys' numbers right now. And that's why, again, even only being 10% of the way through this MLB season, there are reasons to be concerned. I don't know if we're saying you're hitting the panic button entirely, but I just keep reiterating, we know how this team was built. It was built to produce power and to produce offense. And look, Andy, I know it's difficult to just say, well, when they score 9 runs and then they score 2, that's still 5.5. That's a decent average. That's not really going to be what cuts it, because this pitching staff is going to give up 3 or 4 runs most games. It just is. Your starter's going to go 6 and give up 4 like Gibson did over the weekend, and then the bullpen's going to be able to hopefully keep it close at that point. You're going to have to score 4 or 5 runs to get either to extra innings or to win the game. And right now, if you look at the number of times the Cardinals have scored more than 3 this season, it hasn't been many. It's only been, I think, about 6 of the 16. I'll double-check that number, but it's been not frequently enough. That number being above 3 is going to be so critical. It's just not going to be a very fun year if they continue to have the frequency of the 0 games and the 2s and the 3s that they've had to this point.
Yeah, at the very least, you need to have more games of scoring 3 runs than you have of the opposite, right?
3 is not even enough. Give me 4, because they're not going to. 3's not going to win them many games. It's just not with the way they're built. Yeah. They were built to have pitchers that get deep. They're innings eaters, right? But over those innings, they're going to give up 3 or 4 runs. So it's incumbent upon this offense to get to at least 4. And I get it. There are other teams that say, well, you can say that about any team. Like, if you don't score at least 4, you're probably going to lose. It's because of the way they built the pitching staff. My hypothesis is that it's even more important for the Cardinals offense in 2024 to be that kind of team than it is for almost anybody else in baseball, because they built a team knowingly that's got starters that are going to give up that 4 spot, but then their expectation is they still get you through 6 or 7. That's how they built it. They chose to do it that way. So you might say, well, it's not easy to score 4 every single time. You're going to have days that are bad. I know, but that's the way they built this team. So that's kind of the standard that I think I want to hold them to say this is what the expectations are going to have to be for this offense, or you're going to have to change your expectations for the season-long record because it's not going to line up without this offense really getting it going.
Let us know, do you think this offense is contender worthy? I want to get to this text here from Steve. It says an MLB lineup is not going to be good when your primary DH is a catcher. Contreras should either be behind the plate or gone. Unfortunately, the contract has crippled them. I'm trying to look to see how many times Contreras has actually caught this year. If I had to guess, though, it's either close to half or maybe a little bit under, but it's not because
it's going to be
using him as a DH, it's because he was hurt.
Yeah, largely because of the injury. And here's the other thing. One of the reasons you shouldn't look at Contreras as, even when he's in the DH spot, you shouldn't say, oh, it's Contreras in the DH, and it's honestly more about Ivan Herrera. His good hitting to begin the season has forced the Cardinals to go, we got to find a way to get Herrera into the lineup, and the easiest way to do that is to go ahead and DH Contreras. So unless you're just anti-Ivan Herrera in his OPS, which is like 850 at this point, one of the good performers in the St. Louis lineup,
yeah.
That's a bright spot, and that's why Contreras ends up at DH more often than he hasn't, just as a result of they're trying to find a way to get Herrera in there. He sat for a couple games in a row, and you go, well, where's Ivan Herrera? He's one of the few guys that's actually been hitting for this Cardinals team. And so that's really the reason for that. I get the point of, well, the contract and, this is not the most ideal use of resources if you've got two catchers in the lineup and one of them's got to be, penciled into the DH spot. Honestly, there's a longer story that goes into that. Ivan Herrera had a chance to be the franchise guy for the Cardinals the year that Yachty was going into his last year, and that was a year that he was just ill-prepared for what the Cardinals needed to see from him, and he got sent down for Austin Romine at one point in that summer because he just was not ready as a catcher behind the plate. He loved to hit, but he wasn't taking the catching side seriously enough. He has since made a complete 180-degree turn, and Ivan Herrera is on a really good path now, but the Cardinals had to panic and sign a catcher because they kind of thought maybe Herrera would be ready to take over, and then when he wasn't, Andy, they said, well, we got to have somebody and try to keep this legacy alive. And then it turns out he kind of used that as the wake-up call, and now he's good again, but the Cardinals still have Wilson on the hook for more years on this contract.
And even then, with the games that Wilson Contreras has played in, which is 11 so far, he's caught 7 of them. So that's more than half.
Yeah.
And he caught 2 out of the 3 this weekend. He's still the primary catcher. He's not the primary DH.
The one game this weekend he DH'd was because Herrera had sat twice and they needed to get him back in the lineup after they were struggling. Now, granted, he was in the lineup Sunday and they still didn't perform offensively with him and with Wilson in there. They both had 1 hit. But that was really the reasoning for that. The other times Contreras was DHing, Andy, was right after he came back from that injury. The pain in the hand was such that he couldn't get behind the plate yet. So I understand the point there that maybe the Cardinals aren't maximizing their resources, but that was honestly just a bad timing situation. Because if Herrera looked now like he did in 2022, that he would be the guy.
Yeah,
they would never have signed Wilson Contreras, which is not to say Wilson's not a good contributor to this team, but that as far as utilizing your resources, they would have spent $87.5 million on another pitcher or whatever, or put it into Ballpark Village, whatever they would have done.
Oh, I know what they would have done.
If Herrera was the guy now that they thought he was going to be in 2022, or they hoped he would be, then he would have just taken over, and maybe even Kisner would still be here as the backup. But as it stands, they had to do what they had to do at the time, which has Wilson as part of this team. It is going to be a challenge to figure out exactly how they manage that. How do they find enough opportunity for Herrera while also getting all these other guys that they view as needing playing time? And if they're not going to move guys like Nootbaar to center field to take out a struggling bat like Victor Scott's, that's a balance between prioritizing offense versus defense. There are some difficult decisions that need to be made there, but right now, clearly, 21st in runs scored, I think y'all said that's not going to cut it for this year's edition of the Cardinals. They've got to be better than that if they're going to contend.